All right. Hello, critical thinkers. We are live for the first solo episode that I've done in quite a while. So, welcome to this episode of Healthy and Awake podcast. This one is Brewed Awakening, the shocking reality of coffee addiction. And I love that. Brewed Awakening, right? Like rude awakening. um, so, if you have been following the show, you might have seen the previous episode that I did with my guest, Jason Christoff, who is a self sabotage coach. And we spent a good deal, like half the episode, so maybe 45 minutes, talking about the harms of coffee. And I'll tell you, I know there's probably a lot of people who hear this idea of the harms of coffee and coffee addiction, and there's some defensive people out there. I guarantee it, because when I spoke with Jason, I was very defensive. I'm like, I drink my coffee every day and I'm just fine. I'm caffeinated right now. I'm doing great. I feel great. And the more I talked to him and the more I actually listened with an open mind to what he was trying to tell me, the more it made sense. And ultimately, it led me to quit coffee. So I spent a few weeks weaning myself off of coffee. And let me add that that's why I haven't been putting out as much content as I'm used to. So I've missed, I think, the past 2 weeks. And that's because I've been withdrawing from coffee, which is not at all fun. So let me tell you what's ahead. I expect this to take about an hour. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about coffee and my thoughts around coffee, why I quit, my quitting process, the struggles, my argument against consuming coffee every day, the way that most of us do. And again, let me ask you to please keep an open mind. You don't have to give up your coffee if you don't want to, but I'm just here to make a case that the way that we consume coffee is not healthy. What else is on the list here? Coffee enemas. That's a topic that came up in a previous episode. I think it was that episode with Jason. That's putting coffee up your ass. That is something we're actually going to talk about. Observed evidence of harms or some of the negative aspects of consuming coffee. We're going to talk about alternatives to coffee, including tea and adaptogens and decaf, and what's good and what's not, and what are the things to look out for with coffee alternatives, and my protocol for quitting, my protocol for recovery, and when I will have my next coffee. All of that is ahead. I no longer have my intro. I mentioned that in the past. Really quick housekeeping point. I pulled episode 4 on health coaching. So if you do follow all the episodes, you might notice that that one is gone. I just didn't like my language, the way I was talking about health coaching. I think I can do a better job. So I just pulled it. Now, let's just get right into it, because normally I'll hit the button and my catchy intro song will play, but there was a copyright issue there. And it actually had coffee in the intro, funny enough, so I have to come up with something new for that. But my discussion with Jason on that previous episode of Healthy and Awake podcast woke me up to some of the harms of coffee. And let me be more specific. I strongly feel like I have destroyed my body's natural energy systems. And that's what he really got me thinking about, because let's think about this. You have the natural capacity to have energy, right? You wake up and you should, maybe you're foggy or something like that. That's something to address. But a natural, healthy body should wake up and have energy, especially you get out in the sun, and you should have the means to do that. And I realized that I destroyed my body's natural energy systems, because it's not exactly normal. It's not exactly healthy to wake up and need coffee, or you can't get through your day without it. And if you don't have coffee for a few days, then you're miserable and cranky and foggy and kind of in like a cognitive pain. That is not a sign of good health, right? So again, I'm probably going to do a lot of disclaimers here because I know how defensive people are with their coffee. But I don't think coffee is inherently unhealthy. I think there's some good and some bad. But the way that we use coffee, the way we compulsively wake up and I don't even talk to me until I've had my coffee, there are entire memes indicating just that. I am not human until I've had my coffee. Like, that's not a description of a healthy person, really. So I do think there's a time and a place for coffee, but I personally feel like I've destroyed my body's natural energy systems because for the past maybe 3 weeks or so, I've been on zero coffee, zero. And it's been the toughest thing in the world to make an episode. Like, I don't have my normal charisma that I can just turn on as soon as the camera's rolling. That's why I haven't had an episode in a few weeks. And I will admit, here's another disclaimer, I drank tea before this episode just because I want to actually, present content for my audience who has been hitting me up and messaging me, hey, where's the new episode? So here I am, slightly caffeinated from tea, and it has been a struggle quitting coffee in some ways, and it's been easy in others. So it's been pretty easy for me to just not crave coffee. I'm not like that. I don't wake up, I have my routines so well managed that I'm not just like, oh, I need to have my coffee right now, in that way. But I've definitely noticed that my cognition, my thinking has slowed down. It's very tough to be productive in the same way. I can be productive in other ways, but it's just super tough. And when you think of it, that's an addiction, right? When is addiction ever a healthy thing to have as part of your lifestyle? And all of us coffee drinkers, we make jokes. Oh, haha, I got to have my Dunkin' or I got to have my Starbucks or I can't wake up until I've had my coffee. You're describing addiction. That's not healthy, whether we're talking about sugar, coffee, alcohol, or drugs. In zero circumstances is addiction healthy. And so that's really the perspective that I'm coming at this from, is this is an addiction that many of us have. And I think it is akin to cigarette smoking, because you think of a time where everybody was smoking cigarettes, even on the airplanes, anywhere in the world you can get a pack of cigarettes. It's in all the TV shows, in the movie. It's ubiquitous throughout society, just like coffee is today. Nobody bat an eye at all. Even the doctors are telling you Camel's my favorite brand of cigarettes. So, we did live at one point in a reality where cigarette smoking was as commonly accepted as coffee drinking is today. And I say that because I do see a time in the future where it's very possible that we will look back on our current society and think to ourselves, how could we have just drank coffee every day the way that we did and not even tap into our natural energy? Because there are some pretty serious risks when it comes to drinking coffee every single day. Your body sends you signals for a reason. So let's say you're not a coffee drinker at all, right? You wake up and you feel fatigued and you feel like a little bit slower than usual. That is a signal that your body is sending you. It's trying to tell you something. If you wake up and you're fatigued and you're slow, which is unusual for you, there could be something wrong, right? Maybe you didn't get enough sleep. Maybe you ate something that didn't agree with you and something like that. Or maybe you have some kind of organ failure, right? If you have something like fatty liver disease, one of the symptoms is fatigue. So if you're just drinking coffee all day and you are not at all tapped into your natural energy system that your adrenals do provide you, you should have a natural ability to produce energy. But if you rob yourself of the opportunity to listen to your body's signals, you might not be realizing if something's wrong. You might just be consistently covering up signals in your body telling you that, hey, you're fatigued. That means slow down. That means address this problem. That means, maybe you do have some kind of organ issue or something going on in your body. But if you consistently, reflexively, and compulsively caffeinate yourself, you might just be hiding a problem that needs to be addressed. So that's one very serious possible health implication from drinking coffee in an addictive way. Now, look, I'm going to mention this more at the end, but I'm still drinking coffee. I'm just not doing it like a junkie, like an addict, where I need to have, before I even talk to anybody, I need to have a coffee, or I need to have multiple coffees to get me through the day, or the second I notice that I'm slowing down at all, I'm going to go ahead and slam a coffee. Those are all not very healthy things. And of course, this is the Healthy and Awake podcast. We are trying to be awake to these sorts of things, but we're also trying to be healthy individuals. And so these are all just points that are part of an argument that it is up to you to determine if you want to drink coffee or not. I don't care. You're an individual. You're a free-thinking person. You can decide for yourself. But I think these are things that are worthy of discussion that never see the light of day, that nobody ever talks about. And if we do, it's often in a dismissive, joking context, like those memes that I mentioned, where like, oh, haha, I'm a coffee addict. Haha, isn't that great? Not really. Not when you think about health, and not when you think about this paradigm where, smoking was accepted the way that coffee is today. And I'm not saying coffee is as harmful as smoking, but it could be. It definitely could be. And we just don't realize how exactly it is harming our health, especially the way that we chronically use it. And in a sense, drinking coffee is kind of like borrowing energy. And that's not very sustainable if you're just going to keep borrowing tomorrow's energy. And here's what I mean by that. If you load up on coffee today and you don't have it tomorrow, you're not going to have energy tomorrow. So it's almost like you have twice the amount of energy today, so you have half as much energy tomorrow, right? So when you drink that coffee in that way, it's kind of like borrowing energy. So that's fine, right? Maybe some days you have a big project or you are just tired for some reason and you say to yourself, look, I'm going to have that coffee. I need this energy to get me through the day. Great, fine. But how sustainable is that? Can you keep this up every day? We're just going to be borrowing energy and keep tapping in to like weeks and months ahead. And that's kind of what I'm going through now, is because I've been chronically drinking lots of coffee every day. I stopped drinking it even after I weaned myself off, even after my supplements and my recovery protocol and all these different things. I still struggle to feel the same way that I did when I was on coffee. And I would imagine that's just like drug withdrawal, right? What's the difference between something like that and cocaine? If somebody's doing cocaine, it gives them energy. They get a lot of things done and they feel productive, and then they stop doing it and they have none of those things. That's obviously unhealthy on many levels. And that's the same experience that I'm having with coffee right now. So it's like I've borrowed so much energy from my future that I struggle to have energy in my present. Now, I've mentioned a lot of the bad things so far in terms of my experience from quitting coffee, but there are some pros and cons, and especially when you think of productivity. So my first few weeks without coffee, I've gotten pretty much nothing done. I can do some chores and things like that, but I don't even know how to explain this, because some people are going to hear this and be like, whatever, you're just being weak or lazy. That's kind of the mentality I would have if I heard somebody say something like this. And it's not a matter of like willpower or discipline or something like that. I wake up, I have everything organized, I have all my tasks ready to go, and there's just something like that's part of my brain that just feels missing when I don't have that coffee. And I'm still feeling this from the recovery. So it's been tough to be productive the same way that I was with coffee. But for some reason, working out has still been easy. I have reasons for that. I think just because in my environment, I make it so easy to work out. But I have noticed actually some big benefits to quitting coffee. I've noticed my body's own signals that I mentioned earlier. So I know if I wake up like, okay, I'm going to have a lot of energy today, or okay, something's going on, I'm feeling pretty fatigued more than usual today. You should be in touch with your body's natural signals. Something else, this isn't exactly relatable, but I have something called hyperhidrosis. It's a symptom of an underlying sort of disorder. Hyperhidrosis is really just excessive sweating. And for me, it's in the hands. It means handshakes are always awkward. And social events, same thing, very awkward. But since quitting coffee, I've noticed that this is non-existent. I don't have excessive sweating anymore. Even when I'm working out, I'm not sweating as much. So that's a pretty big plus. And closely related to that is reduced anxiety. So this is another thing that many of us don't notice when we are consuming coffee is our heart rate elevates and our nervous system is elevated too, which is why I got my hyperhidrosis. But for all of us, our nervous system elevates and that makes us anxious. And, if you see yourself tapping your foot or tapping a pen repeatedly on the table, those are signs of anxiety. And coffee definitely contributes to that on some level. And me personally, I've noticed reduced anxiety since quitting coffee. I've also noticed better sleep because we know that caffeine, especially when consumed later on in the day, can affect sleep. So now I'm trying to be more in tune with my body's natural sleep rhythm. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later when we talk about circadian rhythm. I also, and this is a big one of the benefits, I've noticed more time. So who doesn't want more time? And it might seem trivial, but every day, if we drink 1 cup of coffee every day, well, that's the time that it takes for us to slowly meander into the kitchen to prep the coffee, however we prep it. Whether it's a Keurig machine, a French press, a Mr. Coffee, whatever it is, you have to wake up and get your water ready and the coffee itself. You have to do all these things to make the coffee. Then, if you like to enjoy your coffee, you're sitting down, maybe you're scrolling through your phone or reading the news or something like that, and you're spending your time drinking your coffee, doing that. When you think about it, it really is like a cigarette habit. And, that's just another way it's like a cigarette habit. So far we've covered a few ways. And so time is lost if you are a chronic coffee drinker. At least time is lost in terms of the prep, the cleanup, the consumption of the coffee, all those sorts of things. Now, here's where things, in my opinion, get a little more compelling. If you're not sold yet on the idea that coffee consumed chronically might be bad for you, let's talk about other examples where similar things are bad for you that we know for sure. Now, there's this idea of outsourcing natural things that we have in our body. And you see this very commonly with something like testosterone. It's very popular for young men. We, of course, as men, should be able to naturally produce testosterone. That is one of the defining characteristics of being a man. And our pharmaceuticalized society has made it such that men want to consume exogenous testosterone, fake synthetic testosterone that is not from within the body, but we are outsourcing it to these pharmaceutical companies and saying, okay, I'm going to go ahead and consume this chemical to modulate my body's natural testosterone. And what happens when you do that for long enough? Anyone who's ever taken testosterone knows that when you stop taking it after having taken it for a while, your body's natural testosterone is in the toilet. It plummets. People struggle often for years to recover the damage they've done to their natural systems if they've taken testosterone chronically. So this is very common in the gym culture world of people who feel the need to take performance-enhancing drugs. Of course, now you have testosterone's been remarketed as testosterone replacement therapy. It's different. It's not a performance-enhancing drug. This is replacing the natural testosterone. These are dumb marketing tricks that some people fall for. It's the same thing. But the point here is that you are basically diminishing your body's natural ability to produce that testosterone. And you actually, if you're still not convinced, here's another example of the same sort of thing. Let's say you have somebody who's diagnosed with some sort of clinical depression, and they go, well, your depression is tied to the serotonin in your brain, so we're going to outsource the serotonin, and we're going to give you these antidepressant drugs known as SSRIs. selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So again, instead of relying on the body's own natural pathways, we're saying, hey, that's no good. Your own natural pathways are no good. We're going to go ahead and outsource it. We're going to artificially provide it chemically. And they give people the SSRIs. And what happens when they stop taking SSRIs? Well, they don't produce their own serotonin. They become more depressed. They become so reliant on those exogenous antidepressants, the exogenous serotonin, that they can basically no longer produce that serotonin on their own for a significant period of time. So both with the testosterone and with the serotonin, it's a struggle to recover your body's natural systems. So it would follow that when you are outsourcing the natural energy within your body and saying, okay, let's forget about these natural pathways that I have. Let's outsource it with coffee that's going to modulate the adrenal glands that sit on top of our kidneys. Well, it would make sense that if you mess with that long enough, that you kind of exhaust or numb or shut off those pathways naturally within the body. That's been my experience. This is not something that I'm going, hey, look at the study that shows this. We're just using critical thinking right now, which should come before we look at studies. And when you think of it this way, that your body has natural systems and you're basically giving those systems the middle finger when you choose to do something like coffee every day, it makes sense. And if you are a conspiracy theory type person, it also makes sense why coffee is everywhere, is so easily accessible, and is one of the cheapest things that you can buy while the price of everything goes up and up. So I don't know. I'm not saying there's some kind of coffee conspiracy to get people to diminish their body's natural systems, but that is the point that Jason made in the episode where I talked to him, coffee and mind control. And he's of the opinion that this is one of those low-hanging fruits that is dangled in front of us in order to basically allow us to make decisions that harm ourselves. So if you are a really awake person, you understand that our society is set up in many ways to get us to make wrong decisions for our health. To me, that's one aspect of being woken up, is being awake, is realizing that the people who construct our environment want us to be weak and unhealthy. It's easier to control people that way. And so if Jason is right, and I'm not saying he is, it does kind of make sense in some way, this idea that coffee is dangled in front of us to just get us to make one more decision that harms us, kind of like death by 1,000 cuts. Because you look at everything else, the cigarettes and questionable ingredients in our food, and the food itself is like so high in carbs and sugar and all these different things. Our environment has been nudged to be this way, so it is worth thinking about. What else on the topic of coffee? Well, coffee enemas are one thing that has come up in the comments of the Jason video that I did. And so there are some pretty interesting arguments for the idea of coffee enemas, which again is literally to put coffee in your ass. And there's definitely some harms that can come from coffee enemas. So let me see if I can pull this off, if I can actually share the screen. I think it's going to give me trouble. But I'll just read it here so you can't see it. But I'm on a website called bengreenfieldlife.com. He's a well-known health influencer, if you want to call him that. He has his own company that sells supplements and coffee. So, of course, he's going to make an article like this promoting coffee. And I'm going to make sure to include this in the show notes. And so it says here, why on earth would you want to do a coffee enema? And it looks like the short answer here, according to Ben Greenfield, is to clean and heal the colon, to detoxify the liver, to reduce many types of chronic pain, helps to eliminate many parasites, helps with depression, confusion, and general tension, increase mental clarity and energy levels while reducing moodiness or anger, and much more. So some of these are weak arguments because coffee, it helps with depression, confusion, and general tension. Increase mental clarity and energy levels while reducing moodiness or anger. Like, you could say that again about something like cocaine. That doesn't mean it's a good argument to do something like that. Be careful of arguments. We talk about that in a previous episode. I think it's called Arguments. Thank you for arguing. Because that happens a lot in science and health, is making arguments that can lead you into making terrible decisions. So if we really wanted to, just as a thought experiment here, you could take something like hemlock, which kills you if you consume it. That's how they killed Socrates. You go, hemlock, this is organic, non-GMO, all-natural hemlock powder. It goes great in smoothies. The taste is great. It helps with anxiety. After you consume this, you will not have any anxiety anymore at all because you'll be dead. Right, so you can really make some fancy arguments. We've also talked about that in the Eating Bugs episode, which I think is 17 or 18, how they make all kinds of fancy arguments for eating bugs, but if you actually look closer at the picture, you find out that eating bugs, it's not even digestible by humans. So you can go, oh, wow, there's protein, there's omega-3s in here. You can make all these really nice-sounding arguments, but when you actually look at the big picture, they don't hold water because you can't even digest the bugs. So I do think the same thing goes on here with something like coffee enemas or coffee in general. It's, it causes you to be alert. It's like, yeah, so does cocaine. That doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. So this is a really long article that I'm looking at here for pros, for good reasons to do a coffee enema from this company that sells coffee. Mechanical cleansing, antioxidant effects, increased pH or alkalinity of the entire intestinal tract, palmitic acids. So there's a Chinese meridian effect. In acupuncture terms, coffee enemas enhance the liver meridian and balance the large intestine meridian. So like some of this is really reaching. So be very careful if you're going to do something like a coffee enema. Here's another one. The yang effect. Most people's bodies today are too yin in Chinese medical terms, especially those who are old or sick. Yin means cold, expanded, and today it also means ill. So, if you follow the show, I'm not the type of person to dogmatically and religiously say, hey, we need to look at the studies. I like to do critical thinking before we even talk about studies, because half the time you don't even need to look at the studies if you actually do the critical thinking. And with just critical thinking alone here, it doesn't seem like coffee enemas are the healthiest thing that you can do for yourself, especially when you consider the harms, which include perforation of the colon, coffee contamination, right? So if you're using poor quality coffee or it's been sitting for a while, you might be really poisoning yourself. Device contamination. So whatever contraption you're using to actually do the coffee enema could be contaminated. I would imagine that upkeep and cleaning has to be really, you have to be very careful with that. Water quality, of course, is all the parts of this you have to be very careful of, and ultimately ask yourself, is it even worth it? Do I really want to go through this process? Why would I do a coffee enema? So something to think about. Really make the decision for yourself. There's people out there, like I said, Ben Greenfield Life. I'll put that article in the show notes. Kelly Brogan is another one that I heard from someone who commented on that video with Jason Christoff. So let's talk more about, just generally speaking, coffee. Some of the observed evidence in terms of harms or negatives or drawbacks. And when I did bring this up in my newsletter, the Healthy and Awake newsletter, you guys sent me some questions on this topic. So here we go. What are some of the observed evidence of harms or drawbacks? Quite frankly, the long hangover that happens after you quit coffee. So Sometimes if you quit coffee, it's like the next day you'll have a really bad headache. Maybe it's the next 2 days you have a really bad headache. That's not a good sign. The fact that you can't focus at all is not a good sign. But like we said with SSRIs or testosterone, if it carries over into like weeks or months, that's a terrible sign. That really indicates that you might have done some damage to your body's natural systems. So what else? What are some of the other drawbacks around coffee? Well, when you're consuming coffee, mania is possible. And that's just really something worth being careful about. And this is something I've definitely been guilty of. If I drink too much coffee, I have no control over my own energy. I've seen this in other people too, where I'm thinking, is this guy on crack or what's going on? So if you can't have control over your own energy, not exactly a sign of someone who's in perfect health. I would think that what's most ideal in terms of health and autonomy in terms of your health is really having pretty much your control over your natural energy, where you don't need to compulsively reach for this coffee. But also, if you have the coffee, you're not like a manic person bouncing off the walls with your eyeballs popping out of your head. What are some of the other drawbacks? Financial cost, of course, just like quitting smoking. If you quit cigarettes, you have all this extra money. Like, wow, I've been spending all this money on cigarettes. Same thing. There are a lot of similarities between smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee when you think of the actual habit and behavior. Going on in terms of drawbacks, the coffee beans themselves, you have to be very careful. There are a lot of variables that can present themselves with something like coffee beans. So we're talking about the roast is one obvious one. So you have light, medium, and dark. But in terms of health, you have things like mold, fungus. How old is this? And, you might look at coffee and it looks totally fine. You're looking at the coffee beans and you're looking at the ground coffee. It might look normal. But if there is mold or fungus or mycotoxins, that might not be obvious to the eye. It might be on a very small level, and you're actually preparing a nice cup of fungusy mold in the morning. If you're doing that chronically every day, if you don't really have a good source of coffee, that can really take a hit on more than just your energy. You could be actually poisoning yourself in some level if your coffee is contaminated. And we even mentioned that, I think this was on the bugs episode, that because of regulations around food, that it's very likely that there could be insect parts in your coffee beans or ground coffee, because processing plants allow for a certain percentage of insect parts in many foods, coffee being one of them. Okay, so we've talked about the hangover, the manic days, the financial cost, the quality of the coffee beans, also the packaging. So we know that plastic packaging has endocrine disruptors, and this is true of the tins as well. So if you're buying it in like a Folger tin, very often those tins are lined with BPA. So plastic, endocrine disruptors is another variable there when we think about health. What else? Water quality. So of course, coffee, it needs water. So are you using filtered water, or is there pharmaceuticals in the water? Because even the municipal water, even though they process it and they treat that water that makes its way to your tap, there are some things that they don't remove, like pharmaceuticals, like microplastics, like fluoride, which is controversial. So water quality is just another variable. What about the coffee making apparatus and process? So if you're using a Mr. Coffee machine, you have to think about the bleached filter that could be leaching extra bleach chemicals into your coffee, or the plastic K-cups that could be leaching more endocrine disrupting plastics into your coffee, or other plastic parts from the apparatus itself. If you're using something like a Keurig machine, a Mr. Coffee, you don't want plastic to be heated around your food or water or coffee. Heating plastic accelerates the leaching of those plastics into the food or the water. And finally, the last variable here that you have to consider with coffee, the potential drawbacks, is the drinking container itself. So if you go to Starbucks and you get one of those paper cups, it's lined with plastic. So naturally, if you have a paper cup, if it's actual paper and you pour hot coffee in there, it's just going to melt and disintegrate. So in order to hold the hot coffee, it's lined with plastic. And then you're drinking it through the plastic lid and you're stirring it with the plastic stirrer. And it's just tons of plastic. And so I do think there are ways to make healthy coffee, or at least coffee that's free of all these extra things. So for me, I would use a French press, so like a metal one. So there's no plastic parts. If you get a good one, you can really heat it up in a stainless steel pot. So there's no plastic whatsoever. You know, if you are very vigilant about this, I think it can be done. But most people are driving through Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts where not only is it going into a plastic cup, the water's probably not filtered, the machines, you know, look at the people working at these places. They're not putting all the top effort into cleaning these machines as meticulously as they could and making sure that the coffee is as fresh as it could possibly be. Like, no. Anybody who's ever worked in a restaurant knows that by the time it makes its way to you, whether it's coffee or whether it's food, it's taken some hits in terms of quality. If you want quality, whether we're talking about food or coffee, you need to really go out of your way to make sure you're getting the best quality. Now, I know some people still might be pushing back. Mike, what about the benefits of coffee? Well, I think I addressed that a little bit already. You know, you can make arguments in favor of anything. You know, hemlock, like I said before, or nicotine even. Like if you really wanted to, you can make a strong case for something like nicotine, and you still see that today. Let's say instead of nicotine, let's say cigarettes, because you actually can make some arguments in favor of nicotine. But let's say cigarettes, because nicotine is in cigarettes. You can go, well, look, there's actually benefits to smoking cigarettes. It has nicotine in there. Nicotine is shown to help with cognition. It can be neuroprotective. When people are smoking a cigarette, they report a dramatic reduction in anxiety. It's also great for your social health because cigarette smokers tend to stick together and they can smoke cigarettes. And so my point here is that, yeah, you want to talk about benefits. Well, you know, you can make a case for benefits of just about anything, like we just did with hemlock and with cigarettes. So please understand that these are just arguments, and that, you know, reading an article from USA Today that says coffee has antioxidant properties and therefore it's the best thing in the world for you, that's just an argument. Don't take that and run with it. You know, many people, I think they see that and they go, hey, this is exactly what I wanted to hear, so I'm just going to go with that. This is where we take a shift in the episode. We're about halfway through, and I think I've beat to death all the negatives and considerations around coffee. So if at this point, maybe you're like, okay, I'm going to quit coffee, or maybe I'm going to reduce my coffee a little bit, but what the hell do I do? Well, this is where we're going to talk about alternatives to coffee. And I have a few here on the list, but please understand that this is not for everyday use, because otherwise you're guilty of the same mistake that's being made with coffee, right? You're not allowing your body to use its natural systems. So if you quit coffee and then you're just drinking tea every day, that's not exactly a solution to the problem. It's not the coffee itself that's the big problem. It's really the repetition, the chronic use of it every day. So here we go. Alternatives to coffee. What do we got? Dark chocolate actually contains theobromine, a natural stimulant that is milder than coffee. So dark chocolate's great. And I will say for all of these alternatives, for anything that you try to replace coffee with, it's not going to be a perfect replacement. I'm saying this as somebody who's going through this right now. Coffee is coffee, but there are things that can help. Dark chocolate being one of them. What else? Tea can be great. Tea doesn't always have caffeine. You can definitely make your own blends of tea, and that's what I have here. So for several years now, I've been making my own blend of tea for cognitive benefits. Tea, I don't give a shit about tea, but I do care about my cognition and thinking as sharply as I can. And so I did the research on PubMed and Google Scholar and found the most research-backed teas that can help with cognitive performance and executive function and all things of that sort. Some of these teas here in my blend do have caffeine, which I will note as I list them. And I will put the tea blend listed in my show notes as well. And maybe I'll even start selling this on Etsy. We'll see. Let me know if you want to have a tea like that. Healthy and Awake tea blend. I can do something like that. So here we go. Rooibos tea is high in antioxidants and caffeine free. So if you're looking at teas to replace your coffee consumption, Rooibos is a very good tea. Also, jasmine, dragon, pearls are low in caffeine. So they do have some caffeine, but they're low. Sencha is a type of green tea rich in antioxidants, moderate in caffeine. Matcha, high in antioxidants, and provides a calm alertness. It is high in caffeine. Another one, I have 3 left. Yerba mate, rich in antioxidants and nutrients. It is high in caffeine. These last 2 are not high in caffeine, and that is hibiscus, which can lower blood pressure, and sage, which enhances brain function and improves memory. So those are all the components of my current tea blend, but I would probably cut out the ones that have caffeine if I want to make this something that's more sustainable. And so there are definitely some benefits to tea. What else in terms of alternatives to coffee? You may have heard this term before, adaptogens. And I'm going to read here because I want to make sure I get this right when I describe exactly what adaptogens are. So an adaptogen is a natural substance considered to help the body adapt to stress and to exert a normalizing effect upon bodily processes. Adaptogens have been used in herbal medicine for centuries and are said to boost energy and resilience, improve focus, and enhance overall well-being without stimulating or depressing the system. The mechanism of action. Adaptogens work at a molecular level by regulating a stable balance in the hypothalamic, pituitary, and adrenal glands. So this is something, if you've ever heard of the HPA axis, the hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis, which is a lot of fun to say, but is really the part of the body that is heavily responsible for your energy. So actually, it goes on here in this paragraph. Hypothalamic, pituitary, and adrenal glands. These glands are involved in the body's response to stress and the regulation of processes like energy production and immune response. Adaptogens easily help modulate the body's stress response by interacting with hormone production and cellular energy status. And some common examples of adaptogens include ashwagandha, holy basil, rhodiola rosea, panax ginseng, cordyceps, and maca root, as well as others. So there's a lot more here. I got this from perplexity.ai, which is like the new Google. And the point of me saying this is that some adaptogens can be very good for a coffee replacement as well as recovering from coffee withdrawal. So some of them I'm actually using myself now to help me get through this coffee withdrawal. And I'm going to list some of them here. So maca root is one of them. a Peruvian root known for its energy-boosting properties. It's an adaptogen, helping your body adapt to stress and balance hormone levels. It can boost libido and improves mood, often used in smoothies or as a powder supplement. So I take it in capsule form. I get most of my supplements from Dr. Mercola at shop.mercola.com. I am not an affiliate or a sponsor. I have no relationship with them whatsoever, so I'm not getting any kind of kickback. That's just who I trust for my supplements the most. Other than maca root, there is ginseng. It is a root used in traditional medicine for centuries. It is also an adaptogen. It can help with energy and reduce fatigue. It may improve brain function and has anti-inflammatory properties, consumed as a tea or in supplement form. That's another one I was getting from Mercola as fermented ginseng, but I think he's discontinued it, so I don't have a recommendation for you there. Here's another one that I actually do feel like this could maybe be used every day. At least I do, and I don't think much about it. Maybe I should. And that is mushrooms like cordyceps, chaga, etc., reishi. So these are all various types of medicinal mushrooms. These fungi have different mechanisms depending on which one you're talking about, but many are adaptogens and help the body use oxygen more efficiently. Benefits include increased endurance, better immune function, anti-aging properties. And I have two more here in terms of adaptogens. Rhodiola rosea is a flowering herb. Is another adaptogen, helps your body adapt to stress and fight fatigue, improves mental performance under stress. And finally, guarana, a Brazilian plant that contains caffeine. So be careful of that one because it contains caffeine. The caffeine in guarana acts similarly to the caffeine in coffee, but is released more slowly. Long-lasting energy without the jitters, often found in energy drinks. I mean, if you're going to use something with caffeine, kratom is another one. Kratom is of the coffee family, or if you take it in low doses, it gives you lots of energy. If you take it in high doses, it has a morphine-like effect, and it's totally legal in, I think, all states, if not most states. But it can be hepatotoxic, so people have taken massive amounts of kratom and have needed liver transplants. So it is something to think about. If this kratom from the coffee family is hepatotoxic, what about the coffee that we all consume and know? It's something to think about. I'm not saying it is hepatotoxic coffee, but it could be. So with all these coffee alternatives that I listed, what are some of the things that I should look out for? Well, you should use a brand that you trust. I mentioned Mercola is the one that I trust. If you're looking at the mushrooms, Host Defense is one that I trust. That's from Paul Stamets. That's his company. He's one of the world's leading mycologists, which is a mushroom guy. So make sure you're getting it from a trusted source. Look out for the ingredients. So in the supplement world, a lot of these companies want to, of course, sell you their supplement. So they might include extra ingredients in there just to pad it up that you don't need. Certainly artificial things, artificial flavors. It's weird that in some supplements you'll see artificial colors. You don't need that, right? We could talk all day about the possible harms about artificial colors, but the reality is that you don't need that as an ingredient in any of these supplements whatsoever. It is simply not needed. So if you're looking for coffee alternatives, look at the ingredients. Look at the caffeine level. Is there no caffeine? Is there some caffeine? Some supplements have green tea extract. And this is something I investigated before this episode. There's no regulation on how much caffeine can be in something like green tea extract. So you might have almost none, or you might have tons of it. And I mean, even if it's the same milligrams. So let's say you're looking at a supplement that says 300 milligrams of green tea extract. It could have a ton of caffeine in there. It could have a little bit of caffeine in there. So something to look out for is caffeine level. Look out for things like sugar. So especially if it's something like an energy drink, you might be giving yourself energy with just a sugar spike. Something to look out for. Misleading marketing. Some of these supplements out there, because, I investigated coffee alternatives for myself when I fully stopped coffee. Some of them are nothing at all. Some of them, hey, this is Energy 10,000. That's the name of this supplement. And you look at it and it's B vitamins and that's it. Like B vitamins and niacin and all these different things that it's 10 times the price. You might as well just buy regular B vitamins for a fraction of the cost. So be very careful about misleading marketing. Be careful about natural versus synthetic. Some people out there, they don't care if it's synthetic. Look at Lane Norton, who's probably the biggest influencer in the space in terms of making those types of arguments. A calorie is just a calorie. If it's synthetic, doesn't really matter. That's not really the position I take, but there are some good arguments in that direction. So it is something to think about if that's important to you, natural versus synthetic ingredients. So really scrutinize your options when you think about coffee alternatives. Now, this is a controversial one, and I might piss some people off here, so that'll be fun. Let's do that. What about decaf coffee? So that should be fine, right? I'm not getting that caffeine. It's good for you. It has antioxidants and all that, right? Well, not exactly. So let's talk about decaf. What exactly makes it decaf coffee? Well, there is a type of process that coffee has to go through in order to remove the caffeine that is naturally there. And I'm going to get into that ahead. But let's talk about, some of the downsides of decaf. You have nutritional loss. So the decaffeination process itself might strip away some of those antioxidants that you're saying are beneficial in the first place. So that might be the only redeeming thing about the only redeeming quality about coffee for all we know is the antioxidants. But this process that it has to go through could strip all that away. So you might not be actually getting those antioxidants. Decaf coffee is still acidic. So acidity is something to think about here, which can have some negative effects on the stomach. That can be a concern for people. Decaf also comes along with the triggers and association. So if you're really trying to quit actual coffee, this is basically like O'Doul's. Decaf coffee. So if you're an alcoholic trying to quit, O'Doul's might just cause triggers for you that make you want to drink again. So that, of course, doesn't apply to everybody, but it is something to think about if you're really trying to quit. It could kind of be like Nicorette, right? Caffeine content is something to think about with decaf, because just because it's decaf doesn't mean it's caffeine free. Those are two different things. Most decaf coffees still contain some caffeine, although of course it's lower than non-decaffeinated coffee. Now, let's do this. So this is actually the decaf process. Some methods of decaffeination use chemical solvents like ethyl acetate or methylene chloride, which could leave residues in coffee. So what are those? What are ethyl acetate and methylene chloride? Let's get into that. Ethyl acetate is an organic compound, and it can be derived from natural sources like fruits. In industrial production, it's typically synthesized from I'm not even going to try to say that, but one of them is acetic acid. Let's see. Acetaldehyde. Damn, I should have practiced that. But point being, it's typically synthesized from other components and is usually not naturally derived if it's done from these major food companies. So what about its usage? Apart from decaffeination, it is also used as a solvent in paints, coatings, and the production of plastics. So yeah, that's the ethyl acetate that is used in decaffeinating your coffee, but is also used as a solvent in paints, coatings, and the production of plastics. And, as most things go with the FDA, it is generally recognized as safe, which just means that it doesn't kill you right away, basically. The other chemical here used to decaffeinate coffee is methylene chloride, also known as dichloromethane. It is a volatile organic compound made from methane or chloromethane. It is widely used as a powerful solvent in various industries, including paint removers and pharmaceuticals. And it is considered more toxic than ethyl acetate and has been linked to cancer in some animal studies. Its use in food processing, including decaffeination, has been increasingly scrutinized. So decaf is, as far as I can tell, much worse than regular coffee because it still has the caffeine that you're trying to get away from, but it also has these possible extra chemicals in there. I will note that there is a type of decaffeination process called Swiss water decaf, although that's not something I can speak to. I don't know how different that is from these chemicals, and I would imagine that some of these concerns are still the same, even if it is a more gentle decaffeination process, like nutritional loss, acidity, triggers and associations, possible caffeine content still being there, quality of the coffee beans. So those are all things that still have to be considered. Now, I am getting close to the end here because this is pretty much the last section on coffee, and that is the actual process of quitting and recovering. So hopefully by now you've at least considered that coffee isn't something that can be part of a healthy lifestyle if you're going to basically abuse it and use it every single day without any thought. That's not healthy. There's no argument for that being healthy at all. I'm still going to consume coffee. I'm going to get into that later. Coffee itself can be consumed, but abusing it, having addiction, that's never healthy. So what can we do to quit and get ourselves away from coffee if we decide we want to do that? Well, we can wean ourselves off, and there's different ways you can do that. Depends on the approach you want to take. I guess one approach is that we know that coffee beans have different levels of caffeine. So if this seems practical to you, maybe you can do I think the light coffee roasts have the most caffeine. So if you're there already, maybe you go from light to medium to dark, and you decrease your caffeine consumption that way. I'll tell you exactly what I did was I used a scale to measure the amount of coffee beans that I was using. So it was 25 grams of coffee beans for one coffee for the day. And that was it. That was my coffee for the day. I don't know if that's a lot or not, but that's what I was doing. And so I would just weigh my coffee when I made it. And the next day it would be 24 grams and then 23. And I would just gradually reduce my coffee over time that way. And honestly, it wasn't too bad. That's the process that I would do again if I found myself addicted to coffee again. I would still wean myself off carefully. Mostly because I want to avoid the headaches. That's the worst. There's really, the only thing that can be done about that is either drink coffee to get rid of the headache, or you take, the ibuprofen that has like shit in there. You look at those inactive ingredients, especially if you get the generic ones. The generic ones, that's where they put the worst shit in there from the inactive ingredients. I'm not going to get into that though. What else? What else can you do for your quitting protocol? This sounds so obvious, but it is so important. A healthy lifestyle, and I'm going to be more specific. Be cautious with exercise. So if you're already struggling with energy after you've quit coffee, you do not want to burn yourself out with exercise. This is a mistake that I made. Because when you exercise, you get those endorphins, you feel good. It kind of gives you that high that replaces the high that you get from the coffee. And I was thinking to myself, wow, for not being on coffee like I usually am, I feel great. I have this energy. I'm running, and I don't even usually like running, and I'm doing all these push-ups and all that. It was just an endorphin high, basically, because then it was terrible. The next few days after that, I had less energy than ever, and I couldn't even have my coffee. So be cautious about exercise, but definitely still do exercise because that will give you a nice boost. Hydration, of course, make sure you're staying hydrated, because sometimes when you feel slow, it could just be that you're dehydrated. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. That's, of course, super obvious, because that, you get enough sleep, that helps you with energy. Here are some that are less obvious. Be careful with your diet. So one thing that I did when I quit coffee was that I also quit sugar completely, and I switched into keto. And the keto diet is supposed to help you with energy, because your body shifts into into burning fats. And so that's a whole separate episode. We could talk about that later, but definitely be careful with your diet. If you're going to stuff your face with sugar, that's, going to be just as detrimental as drinking tons of coffee. The last one here is very important, and the one in terms of lifestyle that had the biggest impact on my recovery process from quitting coffee. And that is, pay attention to your circadian rhythm. So get sunlight and avoid artificial light. One thing that I realized is that coffee removes you from your own natural circadian rhythm, right? One of the results of a healthy circadian rhythm is that you get energy when you're supposed to. So you wake up, you see that it's daylight, the sun's out, that programs your circadian rhythm. It gets your body doing all the functions that it's supposed to do inside, all the hormones, all that stuff. So a healthy person with a calibrated circadian rhythm should have natural energy as much as they need at all the right times. So that means if you are quitting coffee and you're trying to repair your body's natural systems, it will be helpful to get regular sunlight and to avoid the artificial light that is harming your health. There's no way around that. If you're up late at night looking at your phone, that is hurting your health for a fact. So whether or not you're quitting coffee, that's something to pay attention to. But especially if you are quitting coffee, be careful of your light environment. And if you want to hear more about that, look at my previous episode where we talked about blue light and the harms of it. I forget what number that is. Last few things in terms of lifestyle is be organized, because if you already are slowed down, if you have foggy thinking, having a disorganized environment is just going to slow you down even more. It's going to be demotivational. It's going to make things much more challenging. So, propaganda is actually a big one, and this goes in multiple directions. So be aware of the propaganda in your environment. What signals is your environment sending you in terms of drinking coffee? Do you have a coffee maker ready to go right there that's inviting, that's saying, hey, I know you're trying to quit coffee, but look at me over here. Why don't you come make this coffee? You have, the coffee sitting out on the counter. You can see it and smell it. That is going to harm your efforts to quit coffee if that's what you decide to do, especially TV shows or driving a certain way where you're going to pass the coffee. I mean, it's tough nowadays to avoid coffee shops, but if you're secretly going a certain way because deep down you want to pass that coffee shop so you can give yourself an excuse to drive in, that would be no good. So be mindful of that sort of thing. Be mindful of your mindset. If you're tackling this quitting coffee goal, if you're going after it with the mindset of, oh man, I'm going to fail at this. This is going to be so tough. I know I'm going to lose. Well, of course you're going to lose. You're setting yourself up to lose with that mentality. So be mindful of your mentality, of the words that are in your head, of the things that you're telling yourself, of the arguments that you've convinced yourself are true. Be mindful of all of that. I talked about the propaganda that can impact your behavior that is already there, but what about the propaganda you can create for yourself? This can go a million different ways depending on who you are, what you do, and what you want to do. You can put propaganda in your environment to convince yourself that coffee is not the healthy thing that you want to do. This is one thing I tend to take to an extreme level, thinking like a propagandist. And I know it might sound silly to some people, but it is something that has worked for some of the people that I work with. So let's step away from coffee for a second. And as we talk about propaganda, let's say we're talking about sugar and somebody wants to propagandize themselves away from sugar. Well, if you really want to get extreme with this and have a very strong propaganda attack on yourself, you can really put up posters in your house that say, just like they do with cigarette packs where they put the skull and crossbones on there. Like, these cigarettes are death. They will kill you. I mean, you can literally put posters that say, this sugar will kill you, or you can put labels on the sugary things in your house, just like the cigarette packs. I know this sounds extreme to some people. It's maybe sounds silly to some people, but this is called psychological operations. The military thinks like this when they want to convince people to do certain things. Marketers think like this when they want to convince people to do certain things. And I mean, really, if we're being factual, those symbols that they put on cigarette packs, that is a form of propaganda. That's government propaganda. I would say probably for a good cause, trying to get people to smoke less cigarettes. But nonetheless, it is propaganda. So think like a propagandist. Even if it's extreme or silly, what are some of the things that you can do to change your environment to send signals that coffee is not so great? I mean, really, if you're trying to propagandize yourself, you might want to come from a place of, this coffee is the worst, most evil thing in the world. What can I do to put those signals in my environment, right? I want to be very clear. I'm not saying coffee is the most evil thing in the world, but if you're trying to cultivate a certain mentality and propagandize yourself to think that way, you do need to take it to a little more of an extreme level. And I may or may not be writing a book on exactly that. But speaking of that, if you do want to take more control of your environment, your thoughts, your mindset, how you can propagandize yourself, how you can get more things done, please consider my new program, Creating Time Wealth, is now available for pre-sale. I still have a few more things left. I want to go over some of the supplements that can help you recover and quit coffee. But definitely check out the new program, Creating Time Wealth. So this is exactly what it sounds like. This isn't some silly time management program so you can get a few more things done. No, this is for creating time wealth. And maybe you have some kind of system in place already. Maybe you have some neat planner that you use, or some kind of, use Google Calendar or something like that. This is totally different. It's a paradigm shifting thing. It's really going to disrupt the planner industry. I don't think there will ever be a planner sold again after this course really is off and running. Creating time wealth is really about how you can build your own system that scales with you. So meaning, as your routines change, the system changes with you. If you move, if you get a new job, if you get a new partner, all of that, and you need to change the way you manage your time, your system will change with you. I could say so much more, but maybe you should just check out the landing page if you want to know more about the program, Creating Time Wealth. Please check out the link in the show notes because that is for early bird presale. The price goes up very soon. Right now, you get it for like $75 off. It's just a $99 program, at least right now it is, and you can get it for $24. It goes up November 1st, the price goes up. So don't miss that. Get that now so you can create time wealth. All right, last section here before we wrap up, and that is supplements for recovery. I mentioned some of the adaptogens earlier, and those are sold as supplements, and there is some overlap here. But let me just say this. If you are thinking of adding supplements to your regimen, or you're thinking of making significant changes to your health routine, please check with a healthcare provider, maybe a doctor that's awake, right? Not one of these doctors that's just itching to schedule prescriptions all the time without even looking at you. That's not a healthcare provider. But consult a real healthcare provider, somebody that knows you and cares about your health, if you have someone like that out there. What are some of the supplements we can use for recovery if we've quit coffee or we're really struggling to regain our body's natural ability to have its own energy without having to drink a cup of coffee? L-theanine is an amino acid commonly found in tea leaves. It promotes relaxation and focus by modulating brain waves, which can be especially useful when coping with caffeine jitters or withdrawal-induced anxiety. So L-theanine is something that some people take with coffee to reduce jitters, but it can also be taken when you are withdrawing from coffee. So L-theanine. I have the dosages here, the recommended dosages here, but I'm going to refrain from that because it really depends on your goal and what you're taking, like the exact brand and all these different things. So what else? Magnesium is an essential mineral required for various bodily functions. Magnesium supports neurotransmitter functions and can help manage stress and improve sleep quality, which can be disrupted during caffeine withdrawal. That is one thing I am taking is magnesium. Vitamin B complex, a combination of 8 essential B vitamins. So B vitamins are crucial for energy metabolism and can help alleviate the lethargy and mood swings often associated with caffeine withdrawal. So yeah, you could take the B vitamin complex, or lately, if you prefer a food version to, like if you want to get your B vitamins through food, nutritional yeast, also known as inactive yeast, is a great source of B vitamins as well as protein. This is something I've been eating a lot of because on keto, you really need B vitamins because you just don't get them as much since your diet changes. So inactive yeast is one really good source of B vitamins if you're looking for a food source. What else? Rhodiola rosea is an adaptogen that I mentioned previously in quitting coffee. So we talked about that already. Helps to balance the release of stress hormones. Ashwagandha is, I think, another one we mentioned. Ashwagandha is another adaptogenic herb known for its ability to reduce cortisol levels. Ashwagandha can help manage stress and anxiety, which can peak when quitting caffeine. And all of these, by the way, are very well researched. Here's another one, 5-HTP. You may have heard of this one. It is a natural occurring amino acid. It is a precursor to serotonin, which can help uplift mood, especially useful if you're dealing with irritability or mood swings during caffeine withdrawal. Look, for something like 5-HTP, me personally, I feel like I got that from just sitting in the sun for an hour. Out of everything I've listed so far, sitting in the sun for an hour is the most impactful for me. Especially the first days after having no coffee at all, where it should be the worst. I remember the first 3 days, the sun was out, super bright. I was literally in the sun for at least an hour, sometimes 4 hours, because here in Greenville, South Carolina, we get plenty of sun. I had felt like I drank coffee. So the sun gave me that effect. I realize some people might not have as much sun as other places, but if you are able to, please, that out of everything we've said here today, that's what I would put at the top of the list, is if you're quitting coffee and you want one thing to implement to help you recover and quit, prioritize your circadian rhythm. Prioritize getting as much natural sun as you can and avoiding that blue light, especially at night. But I did actually have one more here on the list that can help with recovery, and this is something that hopefully you're doing anyway, and that is omega-3 fatty acids, whether you're eating fish or whether you're taking something like fish oil or getting it from algae or something like that. Omega-3s are known for their anti-inflammatory properties. They can support brain health, potentially alleviating some of the cognitive symptoms of caffeine withdrawal. And so there you go. Those are all of the supplements you can take if you want. But that's pretty much it. And I mentioned that I will probably have coffee again. And I'm going to treat it like a glass of wine or a cigar or crystal meth. No crystal meth. That's just a joke. But, when you think, I don't really ever drink wine at all, but something like a cigar, that's something I have once or twice a year. And I think that's how I personally am going to treat coffee, is just every now and then if I really feel like I need it. But now that I'm off of it, my hesitation is like, why would I do that to myself knowing that the next day I'm just going to have a headache and then It's almost like a relapse where it might even be tempting to start drinking coffee every day, because then I can rationalize and go, hey, I had a coffee yesterday and I got so much done. Why not just have a coffee today and just this one more day? And the next thing you know, I'm back at it drinking tons of coffee, and then I have to go through the whole quitting process again. So I don't know. I'm going to try to avoid ever drinking coffee again. I mean, I never drink it out and about. I'm never, ever, ever going to drink it at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, given all the things that we've discussed earlier, like, these kids scratching their asses, making your coffee with no care about the cleanliness of the machine and all that stuff. I've seen the kids that work at Starbucks. So yeah, know that. No coffee from Starbucks. But really, the big takeaway, hopefully, is that the coffee is not exactly the inherent problem. It's the way that we use it. And our society makes it very easy to abuse and be addicted to coffee. And it robs us of our natural energy, and it robs us of our health the way it is abused. There is no arguing around that. I know lots of people are not going to want to hear that. I know lots of people are going to keep drinking their coffee. That's fine. But given everything we discussed, there is no strong case for drinking coffee every single day and still maintaining all of your health. And here's the proof. Stop drinking coffee and see what happens. You feel like death. That is not a sign of health. So, are you running the show, or is coffee? I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think. If you're watching this on YouTube, please remember to subscribe, share, thumbs up, post a comment. Let me know what you think. Are you going to keep drinking your coffee, or are you going to stop? Either way, I come from a place of non-judgment. I really don't care if you want to do coffee or something worse. That's totally up to you. I'm just here to make a case so that we can be healthy and awake. Please check out Creating Time Wealth in the show notes below. But most importantly, as always, stay healthy, stay awake.